you've been A, waiting to talk for a while, and then second, I just took your name in vain in regard to this particular group, so you must be ready now.
We didn't want to talk about play tonight, so
Right,
no.
right.
And a lot of what I wanted to say was covered by Robbie. Because the one thing I recognize is that this is like a theoretical physics. I mean, it's not for everybody, and I don't think we'll ever make it for everybody. Just make
Right.
it attractive for those who think it's fun, not only to play and have fun, but also to be able to talk about it,
Mm-hmm.
which is a kind of,
I think
I
my,
mean,
yeah.
Sex said it to try to figure out whom you want to talk to, whom you want to attract with this part of the whole thing.
Right. I think I can make a pretty good case for why. I mean, I did so. I think in an interview for why anybody somewhere, why somebody somewhere might want to talk about play at this level. Um, but again, I agree. It's a choice. It's when a person says, okay, now that I've played, now that I've looked at these videos about play, now that I've shared some thoughts, and with any luck at Adept's Play received, enough content in return that I feel like I'm not wasting my time here. There's this other thing that people sometimes refer to. It says it's like next in the series. Now I want to go check that out now, right? So hopefully, it's in a way, again, to go back to the teaching of biology. I told the students, particularly in classes that for people who were not majoring in biology, so they were forced to take this class by the administration. And they came in and they very much had their, oh God, let's hope this guy isn't a complete jerk. Let's see if we're going to be able to get this, or else I'm going to drop it after this class, like I've already done 2 times, and just keep trying until I get a prof who is at least tolerable for the next 10 to 16 weeks, depending on your school, of torture that I have to undergo. And so, and I tell the students this, and I tell them some administrator over in that building, which has much nicer furniture than either your dorm or this building, and they've got tassels on their loafers, and they're sitting around, and they have nothing better to do except come up with requirements for you, so that you have to pay more tuition and spend more time here. Well, I'm not that person's representative. I hate that person more than you do, I assure you. So what am I doing here? And the students, get interested, right? I mean, and I say, look, I have to. I mean, I no, I don't say I have to do this. What I tell them is I want to be here, and I have my reasons for being here. I need you to. You probably aren't going to agree with this, until you try it. But if you're even willing just to try it this way before agreeing, that's good enough for me. Think of this basically, you're at summer camp right now for this class. You're going to do this thing you don't have to do. You're going to do this thing for a while, and it's going to be over. The question is whether you're going to look back on it as something that you liked, something that you enjoyed, something that you revisit in your mind. And it's only going to be like that if you can relate it to things in your life. It's only going to be like that if you find things in it that are relevant that you never expected to be relevant. Well, I think that can happen, but I can't happen if you come in armored and are just going to let everything bounce off and stay as safe as you can until it's all over. You have to reach out a little bit. And that's all I'm asking you to do. Consider that this first week. I totally get that you're not going to trust me on any of this until we run some things where you're actually graded and you find out if I'm a dick or not. Now, all the students kind of like shudder that I said that, and then they laugh, right? And so the point is, it's a little bit like that. There has to be one step forward by the other person. One step. I'm not going to run around on a street corner passing this stuff out as a pamphlet, right, to just anybody. And so, Claudio, what's that?
That's actually just, you should just include that speech maybe. Like it was pretty good. Like, why RPG theory? That just answers it there. I mean, not exactly why RPG theory, but why should you listen
Mm-hmm.
to me? That's actually pretty good. Like, maybe without the parentheses on like you being a biology professor and everything, but like the basic concept of it was actually pretty good. Like, maybe you should just use that.
Okay, thank you. Sean, what were you thinking?
My thinking is that whether the original people had this in mind or not, uh, RPGs have always been a very subversive
Oh
art
yeah.
form and very much a counterculture. And I think that's something that a lot of us are experiencing when we're trying to bring other people in, is the mainstreaming of our counterculture, or the perceived mainstreaming of our counterculture. And I'm not saying that it's entirely healthy to always be in the basement with dim lights and over caffeinating ourselves. And I'm not talking about that
Right.
kind
We,
of
we need not
that.
closet ourselves. That's actually a fairly
Right.
strong analogy that I just made. But go on. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. But it subverts art, drawing, painting, because it incorporates it. It subverts writing
It really
because it
subverts writing.
includes.
Boy,
Yeah.
Alex has been talking about that with me for a while. Right. Yeah.
And so it's always, at least in my perception, is that it's always difficult to teach. Um, it's easier to entice someone to try something that's against, that's counterculture or subversive, as opposed to teaching that sort of thing. But it definitely needs it definitely needs a why. Why bother with this? And I think that's where the theory comes in. Things like that.
Well, I agree that, I agree about the obviously the countercultural and subversive aspect of it. Those of you who followed my work for as long as some of you have know that I've gone to considerable efforts along those lines. But but I think it's kind of interesting what you're talking about with enticing. I guess what I would say from thinking from what you said, what I'm thinking is wave that freak flag, right? Wave it good, and not as marketing, but almost as anti-marketing. Almost as a, look, there's some really good bug juice here, and you just can't buy it at the store. You just can't. And I'm actually quite. I mean, there's a reason for this, right? Ola, who you guys have sometimes have perhaps seen in some of the consulting and in the Champions Now game, is helping me a lot with promotion and revision of the website and things along those lines. And Herman, I'm going to get to you about the back end of that soon. But the point is that he asked me, he said, why do you have, what is with that 60s, early 70s look you've got going? What is that? What are you communicating with it? Why do you want to do it that way? Clearly, I mean, you need to either beef it up a little bit at the site so that more things at the site look like that. Or if it's at random, get rid of it, because why? What's that about? And so that's really what it's about. It's really about saying, this is about, spraying the side of the van yourself. This is about, making your own underground comics. This is about stepping outside of some of your own boundaries. This is about connecting people in a different way. And it is, bluntly, I mean, I know not everybody has to look at it this way, but that's how I look at it. And so in some ways, I want it to simply have visual impact without explanation. It's one of those things that explaining it, is not what I want to do. That particular aspect of it all, but certainly hitting it hard visually and in other terms, other ways, um, is a real priority for me. So, maybe that's something too stylistically. I mean, obviously, the videos you guys saw are just me at a rented office space here in North Shopping, with the crudest possible equipment at the time. When I reshoot them, they will be better, but they'll be still, a real person in a real place. And they will, but also, what about the kind of visuals, the intro, the framing of the entire thing? I don't really want it to be kitschy retro, but I want it to have the punch of early 70s culture. And that punch is a real punch. I mean, it bowls you over. It's a complete, you are not in the mall. You're not on the cruise ship. You're not in, that's, all the TV shows, how they use that same living room set over and over again. You all know it, right? The stairs going down to the right, and, that whole living room that television drama used for 50 years. Um, you're not in that room. So how I get that across stylistically, all of us are working with our video presentations, those of us who are developing these. Anthony, you just figured out a way to have people like be framed with those cool backgrounds, right, during play. Um, and there's other things too, all of us are doing, but I want to have those phenomenology videos be one step up from what I usually do. And that's the aesthetic that they're going to have too. Something of that kind. Does that make any sense at all? That's yeah. So Zach, I bet we're losing somebody in the middle of all that. But Zach, what did you have? Yeah.
Well, I wanted to say something, but Greg had his hand up before me. If you want to go to him.
Yeah, Greg, what did you have in mind?
A few points. Okay, first, all this discussion on the videos, it reminds me the birth of science studies. Do you know about this? You know that science studies, so is scientists studying scientists. So that's what we are mainly. We're players studying players. And it's interesting because the third study in science studies, in science study, studied biologists. Okay, and biologists answered with the first study. Yeah, we all know about what you're saying. I mean, who is interested in that? So it really echoes with what you say in the fifth video. Yeah, it's evident. Like who's interested to that? So that makes things. So I find it interesting, and there is one principle in science studies who I think is useful, is that you don't use the words of the people you study, to understand what their practice are, And I think that you did a good job with the video. Like, don't use sandbox, don't use story.
Right. I try to stay away from all hobby talk. Yeah.
Okay, but it's important because they exist and people use them as symbol. But we have to make a distinction between analytical tool, and the words we use when we just want to play.
Right.
And I think there's something interesting here, and I want to push it. Do you know about this typology in sociology of games of Roger Caillois? Because no?
Well, yes and no. I've been running into a lot of people in academics, and I went to a conference or two with the people who do this, and I don't really want to get into this author and that terminology, but just for example, there's this whole business about a game versus a toy and stuff like that. Frankly, I think most of it stinks that I've heard. And yet I do understand that they're taking a similar approach and that they're trying to understand what's going on rather than just participate in it, if that's what you're after.